The rain fell steadily outside, tapping against the windows of Mr. Gregory Henshaw's law office. It was an old building, tucked away on the outskirts of Chicago, where the streets were less crowded and the air carried a faint smell of dampness. Inside, the mood matched the weather, gloomy, heavy, and filled with unspoken tension. Laura Miller sat near the far corner of the long oak table that dominated the room. She wore a simple black dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her presence seemed almost out of place amidst the hostility radiating from the others seated around her. Across the table, Karen Langley, Richard's second wife, shot Laura, a glare so sharp it could cut glass. Next to Karen, Ethan and Chloe, Richard's children from his second marriage, exchanged whispers, their voices low enough not to be heard, but loud enough to make their disdain clear. Daniel Langley, Richard's younger brother, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. His scowl deepened every time his eyes landed on Laura. None of them had expected her to show up today, let alone look so composed. To them, she was nothing more than a relic of Richard's past, a mistake he had moved on from years ago. Yet, here she was sitting quietly, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her squirm. At the head of the table stood Mr. Gregory Henshaw, a tall man with thinning gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He adjusted his tie nervously before clearing his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady but tinged with caution. "Today we are gathered to read the last will and testament of Richard Langley." No one responded. The only sound was the rhythmic tapping of raindrops against the window panes. Mr. Henshaw opened the folder in front of him and pulled out a stack of papers. "As you know, Mr. Langley passed away unexpectedly. However, he left detailed instructions regarding how this meeting should proceed. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that what is said here today is confidential and legally binding." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically, earning a disapproving glance from Mr. Henshaw. He continued without comment, flipping through the pages until he found the section he needed. "Let us begin," he said, adjusting his glasses once more. First, Mr. Langley included a personal note addressed to those present. He wished to express his gratitude for the lives touched during his time on Earth. Ethan snorted under his breath, though no one dared interrupt as Mr. Henshaw read aloud. "To my family," the lawyer recited, "I hope these final words bring clarity rather than confusion. Each of you holds a special place in my heart, though perhaps not always in ways you might expect." Chloe shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing sideways at her mother. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers drumming impatiently. On the tabletop, Daniel stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched tightly. Mr. Henshaw paused briefly before continuing. "Now moving on to the distribution of assets." He scanned the page carefully, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Langley has allocated specific portions of his estate to various individuals. First to his brother, Daniel Langley." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. "He leaves $5 million to be used at your discretion." A flicker of relief crossed Daniel's face, though it quickly faded when he realized this amount was far less than he had anticipated. Karen muttered something under her breath, shaking her head in disbelief. Ethan smirked, clearly amused by his uncle's disappointment. "Next," Mr. Henshaw went on, "to his son Ethan Langley he leaves $10 million along with full ownership of his tech startup Innovatech." Ethan's smirk widened into a grin, and he leaned back triumphantly in his chair, shooting a smug look at his sister. Chloe bristled visibly. "What about me?" she demanded, unable to contain herself any longer. Mr. Henshaw raised an eyebrow at her outburst, but continued calmly. "To his daughter, Chloe Langley, he leaves $7 million and the summer house in Aspen." Chloe crossed her arms, clearly dissatisfied with her share compared to her brother's. Karen placed a hand on her arm, trying to calm her down, though her own frustration simmered just beneath the surface. Finally, Mr. Henshaw turned his attention to Karen. "And to his wife, Karen Langley, he leaves $20 million, as well as the family mansion and its contents." Karen exhaled, sharply, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Though still annoyed by the smaller amounts given to her children, She couldn't deny that $20 million was nothing to scoff at. She glanced at Laura, who had remained silent throughout the entire process, and smirked. Surely there would be little left for Richard's ex-wife after such generous allocations. But then, Mr. Henshaw flipped to the next page, and his tone shifted ever so slightly. Lastly, Mr. Langley included a provision concerning his former wife, Laura Miller. The room froze. Every eye turned toward Laura, who sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Karen's smirk faltered, replaced by a look of pure indignation. "This can't be right," she snapped. "She doesn't deserve anything." Mr. Henshaw ignored her, focusing instead on the document in front of him. "To my former wife, Laura Miller," he read slowly, emphasizing each word. "I leave everything, the entirety of my estate, including properties, investments, businesses, and liquid assets." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched, like taut string, ready to snap at any second. Then, chaos erupted. "What?" Karen shouted, slamming her palms against the table. "That's impossible. You must have made a mistake." Ethan jumped to his feet, his earlier confidence shattered. "There's no way Dad would do that. She hasn't been part of our lives in years." Chloe joined in, her voice shrill. "It's unfair. We're his real family." Even Daniel chimed in, his face red with anger. "She probably manipulated him somehow. This isn't legal." Through it all, Laura remained silent, her gaze fixed on Mr. Henshaw. She didn't react to their accusations, nor did she try to defend herself. Instead, she waited patiently for the storm to pass. Mr. Henshaw held up a hand, silencing the group with surprising authority. "I assure you, there is no error," he said firmly. "Mr. Langley's wishes are explicit and legally binding. Any disputes will need to be resolved through proper channels, but for now Ms. Miller is entitled to inherit the entirety of his estate." The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. One by one, the others sank back into their chairs, defeated, but seething. Laura finally spoke, her voice soft yet steady. "I don't understand why Richard did this," she admitted, looking around the table. "But I won't turn down his gift." Her calm demeanor only fueled their anger further. As the meeting adjourned, the tension between them was palpable. Outside, the rain continued to fall, mirroring the storm brewing inside the hearts of Richard's surviving family members. For Laura, however, the day marked the beginning of a journey she never could have imagined, one that would test her strength, courage, and resolve in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Laura stepped out of the law office into the cool, drizzly afternoon. The rain had slowed to a light mist, but the air still carried a chill that seeped through her coat. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck and walked briskly toward her car, parked a few blocks away. Despite the chaos of the will reading, she felt strangely calm, almost detached, as if she were observing the events from a distance rather than living them. As she drove home, her mind replayed the scene over and over again. Karen's outraged shouts, Ethan's disbelief, Chloe's tears, and Daniel's accusations echoed in her thoughts. Part of her wanted to feel guilty about inheriting everything while they received so little, but another part reminded her that none of this was her doing. Richard had made his decision, and no matter how much they protested, it wasn't her responsibility to fix their anger or resentment. When Laura arrived at her house, a small but cozy place she'd bought after the divorce, she hung up her coat and kicked off her shoes. The quietness of the space enveloped her like a warm blanket. It was a stark contrast to the stormy tension she'd just left behind. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the steam rising from the mug. Her peace didn't last long. Just as she finished her tea, there was a knock at the door. She frowned, puzzled by who might visit her on such short notice. When she opened the door, a courier stood there holding a padded envelope. "Ms. Laura Miller?" he asked politely. "Yes, that's me," she replied, taking the package. The courier tipped his hat and left without another word. Back inside, Laura examined the envelope carefully. There was no return address, only her name and address typed neatly on the front. Curiosity got the better of her, and she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly along with a smaller, Sealed envelope marked personal and confidential. Laura unfolded the larger sheet first. It was a letter written in Richard's unmistakable handwriting. She recognized the looping letters and sharp angles immediately. Her heart skipped a beat as she began to read. Dear Laura, I know you must be wondering why I left everything to you. Truthfully, even I struggled to put my reasons into words until now. You were the one person in my life who never asked for anything. Not my money, not my status, not my connections. You stayed by my side when things were tough, even when others turned their backs. After we divorced, you handled everything with dignity and grace, never once trying to hurt me or tarnish my reputation. For that, I owe you more than I can ever repay. This inheritance isn't just about money or property. It's about honoring your loyalty and integrity. I hope you use it wisely, knowing that you deserve every bit of it. But there's something else you need to know. Over the past few years, I've been working on a project, something extraordinary. If used properly, it could change the world. Unfortunately, not everyone shares my vision. Some people would stop at nothing to get their hands on it, which is why I kept it hidden. Enclosed is another envelope containing instructions to help you find it. Please proceed with caution. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. Take care, Laura, and remember I always believed in you. Richard. Laura set the letter down, her hands trembling slightly. She stared at the smaller envelope, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Inside was a key attached to a tag labeled Vault Number 7. There were also cryptic notes scribbled on the back of the tag. Blackthorn Storage Facility, followed by an address and a series of numbers. She leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. Richard's words swirled in her mind. What kind of project could possibly be so important and dangerous that he felt the need to hide it? And why involve her in all of this? She hadn't seen him regularly in years, let alone discussed anything remotely related to work or inventions. Before she could think further, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text message from an unknown number. You shouldn't have. Come back. Her stomach dropped. She stared at the screen, rereading the message several times. Who could have sent it? Was it someone from Richard's family trying to intimidate her? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone connected to whatever secret Richard had left behind? Determined not to panic, Laura locked her phone and placed it aside. She decided to focus on the immediate task at hand, figuring out what Richard meant by Vault Number 7 and the Blackthorn Storage Facility. A quick online search revealed that it was a secure storage unit complex located about 30 minutes outside the city. The address matched the one on the tag. The next morning, Laura woke early, dressed in plain clothes, and drove to the facility. She parked her car far enough away to avoid drawing attention and approached the main office cautiously. The receptionist greeted her warmly, asking for identification and the unit number. Laura handed over her driver's license and the key, explaining that she was there to access Vault Number 7. After verifying her information, the receptionist led her to a large steel door marked with the number 7. Laura inserted the key and turned it, hearing a satisfying click. The door swung open to reveal a small, dimly lit room filled with boxes and files stacked neatly against the walls. In the center of the room sat a metal case, locked securely with combination dials. Laura knelt beside the case, examining it closely. There were no visible labels or markings to indicate its contents. She tried turning the dials randomly, hoping to guess the code, but nothing happened. Frustrated, she sat back on her heels, wondering if the answer lay somewhere else in the vault. Her eyes scanned the shelves until they landed on a dusty journal tucked between two boxes. She pulled it out and flipped it open, finding page after page of Richard's meticulous notes. Diagrams, equations, and sketches filled the margins, accompanied by brief explanations scrawled in his hurried handwriting. One entry caught her. Attention. Progress update phase 2 complete. Stability tests show promising results. Next step. Field application. Risk assessment required before proceeding further. Beneath the note was a sequence of numbers. 4, 9, 3, 6, 1. Laura's pulse quickened. Could this be the combination to the lock? She returned to the metal case and entered the numbers carefully. With a soft click, the lid popped open. Inside was a sleek device roughly the size of a laptop, encased in protective foam. Its surface gleamed faintly under the dim light, and a small display screen blinked to life as soon as she touched it. Though she didn't fully understand what the device did, Laura instinctively knew it was significant, perhaps even revolutionary. Richard had mentioned changing the world, and whatever this invention was, it clearly held immense potential. But with that potential came danger, as evidenced by the anonymous text message she'd received the night before. As she closed the buy case and prepared to leave the vault, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced around nervously, half expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. The facility seemed empty, but the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Back in her car, Laura took a deep breath, steadying herself. She realized that accepting Richard's inheritance wasn't going to be as straightforward as she initially thought. This wasn't just about wealth or property. It was about uncovering secrets, navigating threats, and deciding how best to honor Richard's legacy. Whatever lay ahead, Laura knew one thing for certain: she couldn't do it alone. And yet, trusting others felt impossible. Not after the way Richard's family had reacted, not after the cryptic warning she'd received. For now, she resolved to keep moving forward piece by piece, unraveling the mystery Richard had left behind. Little did she know, the hardest challenges were still to come. Laura spent the next few days poring over Richard's journal and trying to make sense of the device he had left behind. She set up a small workspace in her spare bedroom, spreading out his notes across the desk and carefully examining every detail. The more she read, the clearer it became that Richard hadn't been exaggerating when he said his invention could change the world. The journal entries described a groundbreaking technology capable of altering matter at a molecular level. Using electromagnetic fields and quantum mechanics, the device could restructure atoms into entirely new forms. For example, it could turn ordinary sand into gold, or even transform toxic waste into harmless substances. The applications were endless: curing diseases, solving environmental crises, revolutionizing manufacturing processes. But Richard also wrote about the risks involved if the technology fell into the wrong hands. If weaponized, it could devastate entire cities or destabilize global economies. Despite the enormity of what she was dealing with, Laura couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Richard had always been ambitious, but this went far beyond anything she'd imagined him working on. Yet as fascinating as the discovery was, it brought with it a growing sense of unease. Whoever had sent that anonymous text message clearly knew something, and they weren't happy about her involvement. Her suspicions were confirmed one evening when she returned home from running errands. As she stepped inside, she noticed something was off. The air smelled faintly of smoke, and the lock on her front door looked tampered with. Heart pounding, she grabbed a baseball bat from the closet before cautiously making her way through the house. Everything seemed untouched at first glance, but when she entered her workspace, she froze. The room was a mess. Papers were scattered. Everywhere, drawers had been pulled out and dumped on the floor, and the desk lamp lay shattered in pieces. Worst of all, the sleek device was gone. Panic surged through her as she frantically searched the room, hoping against hope that she'd overlooked it. But deep down she knew someone had broken in and stolen it. Laura sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind racing. Who could have done this? Had Karen or one of Richard's other family members discovered the truth about the inheritance and decided to take matters into their own hands? Or was it someone else entirely, someone outside the circle who already knew about the project? She called the police to report the break-in, but they didn't seem particularly concerned. Probably just a random burglary, the officer said dismissively after taking her statement. Make sure to update your security system. Random, burglary or not, Laura knew better. This wasn't about stealing valuables, it was about silencing her. Whoever had taken the device wanted to control its power, and they wouldn't stop until they ensured she couldn't interfere. Determined not to let them win, Laura reached out to an old acquaintance named Jack Monroe. Jack was a private investigator, with a reputation for handling sensitive cases discreetly. They hadn't spoken in years, but Laura trusted him implicitly. After explaining the situation as best she could without revealing too much, she asked for his help in tracking down the stolen device. Jack agreed to meet her the following day at a quiet cafe downtown. When she arrived, he was already seated at a corner table, sipping coffee and flipping through a newspaper. He looked much the same as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "So," he said after greeting her warmly, "you're telling me you've got some kind of top-secret gadget that everyone's suddenly interested in?" "Not exactly top secret," Laura replied hesitantly. "But yes, it's important and dangerous. That's why I need your help finding it." Over the next hour, she filled him in on everything: the will reading, the letter from Richard, the storage facility, and the break-in. Jack listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes in a small notebook. By the time she finished, his expression was grim. "This sounds bigger than either of us bargained for," he admitted. "If what you're saying is true, then whoever took the device isn't playing around. We'll need to move fast." Together, they devised a plan. First, Jack would dig into any leads related to the break-in, including checking local pawn shops and black market networks. Meanwhile, Laura would continue analyzing Richard's journal, hoping to uncover clues about where else the project might be hidden, or who else might know about it. As the days passed, Laura grew increasingly paranoid. She started noticing strange cars parked outside her house and received several more threatening messages on her phone. Each one was vague but menacing. "Stop digging. You're in over your head. Walk away while you still can." One night, unable to sleep, she decided to revisit Richard's notes. Flipping through the journal, she stumbled upon a section she hadn't noticed before. It contained references to a backup location where critical components of the project were stored. According to the entry, these parts were essential for activating the device fully. The backup location was listed as an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Richard had included detailed instructions on how to access it, along with a warning: "Only enter during daylight hours. Security measures are active at night." Laura debated whether to tell Jack about the discovery. On one hand, she trusted him completely. On the other, Richard's letter had specifically advised her not to trust anyone. In the end, she decided to keep the information to herself, for now. If the warehouse truly held vital pieces of the puzzle, she needed to see it for herself. Early the next morning, Laura drove to the address Richard had provided. The warehouse stood isolated amidst fields of tall grass, its windows boarded up and walls covered in graffiti. A rusted chain hung loosely around the main gate, suggesting it hadn't been secured in years. Taking a deep breath, she climbed over the fence and approached the building cautiously. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating piles of discarded machinery and crates stacked haphazardly against the walls. Following Richard's instructions, Laura located a trapdoor hidden beneath a pile of old tarps. With effort, she pried it open and descended into the darkness below. At the bottom of the ladder, she found herself in a narrow corridor lined with shelves. Carefully labeled containers filled the space, each containing tools, spare parts, and additional items. At the far end of the corridor stood a locked cabinet. Laura retrieved the key from her pocket, the same one Richard had sent with the envelope, and unlocked it. Inside the cabinet was another smaller device, similar in design to the original but incomplete. Alongside it lay a USB drive and a handwritten note: "In case of emergency, insert this drive into the primary unit. It contains fail-safe protocols designed to prevent misuse." Relief washed over her as she realized she now had a way to protect the technology, even if she couldn't retrieve the stolen device immediately. But her victory was short-lived. As she turned to leave, she heard footsteps above her. Someone else was in the warehouse. Heart hammering, Laura extinguished the flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, listening intently. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by muffled voices. She recognized one of them instantly. It belonged to Daniel, Richard's brother. "What do you mean it's not here?" he snapped angrily. This is supposed to be the backup site. I'm telling you, it's empty, another voice retorted. Maybe she already got to it. Laura clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath her fear. So Daniel was involved after all. She waited until the voices faded before slipping back up the ladder and fleeing the warehouse unnoticed. Back at home, she contacted Jack and told him everything. Together, they agreed it was time to strike back. Armed with newfound knowledge and determination, Laura prepared to confront those who sought to exploit Richard's legacy and ensure that his vision for a better future remained intact. Laura knew she couldn't face this alone anymore. With Daniel involved and potentially others working alongside him, she needed help. Jack Monroe had already proven invaluable in uncovering leads, but now it was time to bring him fully into the fold. She called him late that night, explaining what she'd discovered at the warehouse and revealing the USB drive's existence. "This changes things," Jack said gravely after hearing her story. "If Daniel knows about the backup location, he'll stop at nothing to get his hands on it. And if he's working with someone else, we're dealing with more than just family greed." "I know," Laura replied, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "But I also have something they don't. The fail-safe protocols. If I can reactivate the stolen device and upload those protocols, I can shut it down permanently." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "Then our priority is getting you close enough to do that. But first we need to figure out where they've taken the main unit." Over the next few days, Jack worked tirelessly to track down the stolen device. He tapped into his network of informants, scoured surveillance footage, and monitored suspicious activity around town. Meanwhile, Laura focused on deciphering Richard's notes further, piecing together how the technology functioned and identifying potential vulnerabilities. Finally, Jack uncovered a lead. One of his contacts had spotted a group of men transporting a mysterious case into an abandoned industrial complex on the edge of the city. The building matched descriptions of makeshift labs used by tech thieves and black market dealers. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was the best shot they had. "We move tonight," Jack told Laura when he met her at her house. "I'll go in first to scout the area. You stay hidden until I signal it's safe." Laura shook her head firmly. "No, this is my fight, Jack. I'm coming with you." He hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. But stick close and do exactly as I say. This isn't going to be easy." That evening, they parked several blocks away from the industrial complex and approached on foot under the cover of darkness. The air was cold, and the distant hum of machinery echoed through the empty streets. As they neared the building, Jack motioned for Laura to crouch behind a stack of crates while he slipped inside to assess the situation. Minutes later, he returned, his face grim. "There are 4 guards stationed outside the lab. Inside, I saw the device. It's hooked up to some kind of power source. They're running tests on it." Laura swallowed hard but nodded. "We have to act quickly. Once they figure out how to use it, there's no telling what damage they'll cause." Working together, they devised a plan. Using a small smoke bomb Jack carried in his bag, they created a diversion near the entrance, drawing the guards away from their posts. While the guards scrambled to investigate, Laura and Jack slipped into the building unnoticed. The lab was exactly as Jack had described, a cluttered space filled with computers, wires, and experimental equipment. In the center of the room sat the sleek device, its surface glowing faintly as it processed commands. 2 men stood nearby, typing furiously on laptops connected to the machine. Laura recognized one of them immediately. It was Daniel. His brotherly charm had vanished, replaced by a cold ruthlessness that sent chills down her spine. The other man was unfamiliar, likely a hired technician or accomplice. "Now what?" Jack whispered. Laura glanced at the USB drive clutched tightly in her hand. "Distract them. Give me 10 seconds with the device." Jack nodded and stepped forward, clearing his throat loudly. Both men turned toward him, startled. Before they could react, Jack lunged at the technician, knocking him to the ground. Daniel shouted in anger and reached for a nearby weapon, a crowbar resting against the wall, but Laura didn't hesitate. She sprinted to the device and inserted the USB drive into a port labeled Emergency Override. The screen flickered, displaying a progress bar as the fail-safe protocols began uploading. Daniel realized what she was doing and charged at her, grabbing her arm roughly. "You think you can stop me?" he snarled. "Do you have any idea what this thing is worth?" "It's not yours to sell." Laura snapped back, struggling against his grip. "Richard trusted me to protect it, not you." Their struggle knocked over a nearby tool cart, sending sparks flying across the floor. Jack managed to subdue the technician and rushed to help Laura. Together they pushed Daniel away, giving her just enough time to complete the upload. As the progress bar reached 100%, the device emitted a high-pitched whine before shutting down completely. The lights in the lab flickered and went dark, plunging the room into silence. "What did you do?" Daniel yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "I neutralized it," Laura said calmly, stepping back. "Without the proper codes, it's useless. You'll never be able to activate it again." Daniel lunged at her once more, but Jack intercepted him, pinning him to the ground. "This isn't over," Daniel spat, glaring at Laura with pure hatred. "You'll regret crossing us." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Jack had called the authorities earlier, ensuring backup would arrive just in time. As police officers stormed the building, Laura felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time since Richard's death, she allowed herself to believe that the worst might finally be behind her. Back at home, Laura reflected on everything that had happened. She had started this journey thinking it was about honoring Richard's memory and securing her future. Instead, it had become a battle to protect humanity from a dangerous invention, one capable of both incredible good and unimaginable harm. With the device rendered inert, she decided to donate most of Richard's fortune to charitable causes, focusing on education and scientific research aimed at solving global challenges. The remaining funds would be enough to secure her own future without indulging in extravagance. As for the technology itself, she entrusted the blueprints and notes to a team of ethical scientists recommended by Jack. Their goal was to study the principles behind Richard's work and explore safer applications that wouldn't risk falling into the wrong hands. Though the ordeal had tested her strength and resolve, Laura emerged stronger than ever. She had faced betrayal, danger, and uncertainty, and come out on top. More importantly, she had stayed true to herself and honored Richard's wishes in the best way she knew how. Sitting by the window one quiet evening, Laura watched the sun set over the horizon. The weight of recent events still lingered, but so did a sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, with courage, integrity, and hope for a brighter tomorrow. Weeks passed after the confrontation at the industrial complex, and life slowly began returning to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after everything Laura had endured. The police investigation into Daniel's activities revealed a tangled web of corruption involving several high-profile individuals who had sought to exploit Richard's invention for their own gain. Arrests were made, and the media buzzed with stories about the mysterious device that had nearly fallen into dangerous hands. For Laura, the aftermath was both exhausting and liberating. She attended court hearings to testify against Daniel and his accomplices, ensuring they couldn't evade justice. Though Daniel glared at her during every session, his anger no longer intimidated her. She had faced far worse, and she knew she'd done the right thing. With the legal proceedings underway, Laura turned her attention to what mattered most, honoring Richard's legacy. She spent hours sifting through his notes and journals, separating the scientific breakthroughs from the personal reflections. It was bittersweet work, reminding her of the man Richard had been, ambitious, flawed, but ultimately driven by a desire to make the world better. One evening, while organizing his papers, she stumbled upon a handwritten note tucked inside the back cover of his journal. It wasn't addressed to anyone specifically, but its message resonated deeply with her. To whoever finds this, remember, true innovation isn't just about creating something new, it's about using it wisely. Power without responsibility leads only to destruction. Let my work inspire you to build a brighter future, not repeat the mistakes of the past. Laura stared at the words for a long time, feeling a mix of pride and sorrow. Richard had always dreamed big, but he had also understood the risks of unchecked ambition. His final gift to her wasn't just wealth or technology. It was a chance to carry forward his vision in a way that aligned with her values. Determined to honor his wishes, Laura reached out to Dr. Emily Carter, a renowned physicist known for her ethical approach to science. Together, they assembled a team of researchers dedicated to studying Richard's discoveries responsibly. The goal wasn't to replicate the original device, but to explore safer applications inspired by its principles. For example, they focused on developing sustainable energy solutions and medical technologies capable of healing at the molecular level. As the project gained momentum, Laura decided to step back from day-to-day operations. She trusted Dr. Carter and her team implicitly, knowing they shared her commitment to ethical innovation. Instead, she channeled her efforts into philanthropy, using Richard's fortune to fund initiatives aimed at addressing global challenges like poverty, education inequality, and climate change. Her decision didn't go unnoticed. Local newspapers ran stories praising her generosity, calling her the unexpected hero who had transformed tragedy into opportunity. Friends and acquaintances reached out to congratulate her, many expressing admiration for how gracefully she had handled such a complicated situation. But Laura remained humble, brushing off compliments with a simple smile. "It's not about me," she told anyone who asked. "It's about making sure Richard's dream lives on, not just for us, but for everyone." Despite the praise, Laura still grappled with moments of doubt. There were nights when she lay awake, wondering if she had made the right choices. Could she have done more? Should she have acted sooner? These questions lingered, but over time, they became less frequent. She reminded herself that perfection wasn't the goal. Integrity was. And she had stayed true to her principles even when it was hard. One crisp autumn morning, Laura visited the cemetery where Richard was buried. She hadn't been there since his funeral, too overwhelmed by grief to face it earlier. Now, standing before his grave, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The headstone was simple, bearing only his name and the dates of his birth and death. She knelt down and placed a single white rose on the ground. "I hope I've done you proud," she whispered softly. "You gave me a second chance, and I tried to use it well. I promise I'll keep fighting for what matters for both of us." As she stood up, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves around her, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and pine. It felt like a sign, as though Richard himself was acknowledging her words. Smiling faintly, she turned and walked away, leaving the cemetery behind. That afternoon, Laura sat down at her desk and began writing a letter. It wasn't meant for anyone specific, just a message to whoever might read it someday. She poured her heart into the words, sharing her journey, her struggles, and her hopes for the future. Dear reader, if you're reading this, it means the choices I made have shaped the world you live in today. I don't know what kind of world it is, better or worse, but I hope it's one where people prioritize compassion over greed, collaboration over competition, and wisdom over power. I inherited more than wealth. I inherited responsibility. My story isn't unique. It's just one chapter in humanity's ongoing quest for progress. But if it teaches you anything, let it be this. We all have the power to create change, no matter how daunting the odds may seem. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for continuing the work that started long before us. When she finished, Laura folded the letter neatly and placed it inside an envelope marked "For Future Generations." She added it to a box containing Richard's notes and journals, sealing it shut with care. Someday, perhaps decades from now, someone would find it, and maybe, just maybe, they would carry the torch forward. In the weeks that followed, Laura embraced a quieter life. She spent her days volunteering at community centers, mentoring young entrepreneurs and advocating for policies that prioritized sustainability and equality. She traveled occasionally, visiting places she had always dreamed of seeing, and found joy in the simple pleasures of everyday existence. Though the scars of her ordeal would never fully fade, they became part of her story, a reminder of how far she had come. She learned to cherish the present moment, knowing that life was fragile and fleeting. Most importantly, she discovered a renewed sense of purpose, one rooted in gratitude and service. On the anniversary of Richard's passing, Laura returned to the cemetery once more. This time, she brought a small photo album filled with snapshots of projects inspired by his work. Solar panels powering remote villages, children receiving cutting-edge medical treatments, scientists collaborating across borders. She placed the album beside the white rose she had left earlier, imagining Richard smiling down at her efforts. "You did good, Richard," she murmured, her voice steady and warm. "We're doing good." As she walked away, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Laura paused for a moment, taking in the beauty of the scene. Life was full of uncertainties, but one thing was clear. She had played her part in shaping a better tomorrow, and that was enough. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but Laura faced it with courage and resolve. She had weathered storms, confronted enemies, and emerged stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to meet them, not alone but alongside others who shared her vision of a brighter, kinder world. And so, with a heart full of hope and a spirit unbroken, Laura stepped forward into the unknown, ready to write the next chapter of her life.